For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh. Today we are heading to the backwoods with Dolly. Dolly tells the story of a man on the verge of proposing to his girlfriend when it gets interrupted during their hiking trip by a masked killer wearing a baby doll mask. Now, this movie is not to be confused with the killer from Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You. This one kind of pulls from a lot of things, and that's really the biggest crime that this movie commits. And that's really one of the biggest problems this movie has going for it, is that there's so much about it that feels familiar, which unfortunately veers it into forgettable territory because it essentially copies the homework from much better films like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Happy Death Day. This movie also reminds me of the movie Honeydew from a few years ago, where it has that grimy quality to it. There are portions of it that are definitely uncomfortable to sit through. And honestly, I think that's one of the highest compliments I can give this movie, is that it is definitely unsettling and uncomfortable to sit through throughout certain scenes. There are certain breed of films that are just made up of moments. What I mean is, you have a habit of talking about moments from the film rather than the film as a whole. And Dolly is definitely one of those moments films where you will be talking about certain gags, you'll be talking about certain elements like the character design or even some of the location designs as well that are really creepy in this movie. But again, the movie as a whole is just okay. It doesn't break any new ground. It's mildly entertaining, and it has some really unsettling moments, but this will probably be a film that you forget about in 6 months. And that's a real shame to say, because this movie does boast of good performances from Ethan Suplee, especially Suplee. He was probably my favorite part in this movie, but also Seann William Scott is heavily featured in the marketing for this movie, and they just really underutilized him. If I'm honest at all, Seann William Scott is probably one of this film's biggest flaws. For some reason, the film sets you up to believe this movie is going to be taking place and is going to revolve around Scott and his on-screen love interest in this movie, who is played by Fabianne Therese, who is the anchor of this film. She is incredible in this film and definitely one of the film's shining moments here. But the film almost kind of utilizes Scott as a way to say, hey, you remember the guy from American Pie? Maybe you saw him do the bad guy Burkey a few years ago. He's here. He's around. But honestly, there comes a point where you question why Scott as a character is in this movie nearly as much as he is. And that, I think, speaks to the larger issue that this film has, where it doesn't really know what it wants to be. And I think probably one of the most surprising elements of how this film uses its narrative is this narrative essentially is reset at the start of the third act, and it actually uses its twist really, really smart, and really kind of flips upside down everything that you've kind of learned up to that point, but then it fumbles that surprise twist no more than 5 minutes after it introduces it. I think one of my other problems with this movie is the fact that it also is told in chapters, and some chapters are definitely longer than others. Some chapters are extremely short. There's an inconsistency to the length and theme of the trailers rather than just being a traditional narrative. This could have been that, but it felt like it went the extra mile to be just a tad bit fancier than it needed to be when it's essentially a Texas Chainsaw ripoff. The gags here are really cool. If you do like blood, if you do like movies like Honeydew, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this is definitely a film worth checking out at least once. Like I said, I have issues with this film, but it was mildly entertaining, did bring out some really cool gags and deaths throughout the course of this movie, and it also has this really nasty green yellow hue to it that really gives you this grimy feeling. I finished this movie and instantly was like, I need a shower. I feel uncomfortable. And again, these are high compliments that you give to a film like Dolly and Honeydew and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that is what it's supposed to be. The job of a horror film, in my opinion, is to get underneath the skin of its viewer, and this one definitely does that. I'm ready to run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. Now, normally this is the part of the video where we will address the mental health theme, or a theme at the very least, from the film which we're reviewing. We'll talk about it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. However, with this movie still a little under 2 weeks away from its release, we are going to actually come back and revisit the mental health themes the Monday after this film opens. So join us on Monday, March 9th to talk about the mental health of Dolly. But if you or someone you know is watching this currently right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please click the links in our show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Once again, Dolly opens up March 6th from IFC Films, Shudder, and Vertigo Releasing. Thank you guys for watching. Hit that subscribe button, and until next time, remember to stay classy.